Hello viewers, I have chosen a very interesting topic which is very relevant to the people or professions who are involved in the integrations like systems integrations, whether you talk about D365 finance and operation with any external system or vice versa. And at that time definitely you work with APIs. So I will just target how to test APIs using Postman, and this is part one of the series. And later on, maybe I will post an advanced training session as a video, so that it is useful for the people who are working on the integration side. So basically, I will cover here what is an API for the new, programmers and the persons who are involved in integration. So it is very necessary to understand basically what are the APIs, and then I will explain what is the Postman tool, which is very famous nowadays. Although there are many other tools also, but most popularly people are using Postman. So how this tool is useful when it comes to the APIs, and what are various features of Postman, and then I will also discuss about structure of an API request when it is sent from a Postman, or generally an API request, how it looks like. And also I will explain about what is basically OData, or what is the REST API basically. And then we will also cover a small demonstration about it. So to explain what is an API, basically API, if I can explain in one word, it is an interface. And when you talk about an interface, it is basically a bridge or a common thing, or a mediator which talks between two different systems. So API, you can call it as an interface or thing through which you can communicate from one system to another, because two different systems can be incompatible with each other, developed on different technologies. So there must be some bridge between two different software or applications. So that is basically application programming interface, which helps in communicating between two different systems or applications. So in a typical case, when you talk about API nowadays, it is most commonly called a web API normally, because everything is on web. All majority of big ERP systems are also on cloud or web, and also many open source systems are on cloud. So there are three different models of cloud. So SaaS model, software as a service, is most common. So the web API enables from an external system to talk to a native system, or between two systems. So when we call an API, normally it is meant to be a web API. So it is referred to a request made by a client application, and then a response is made by a server. Response is for that request, a response is made by a server application, whether it is on the internet or whether it is on a private network. So examples can be object-oriented program, which are basically implementing public methods. There are access modifier, public, private, and protected. So public are available to external classes. So external classes or external application, once it is exposed, so the public method available can take some parameters or a filter criteria on which that method will basically pass on that values, and also get it calculated, and then it will return something. So basically that is meant to be having an API. Once a object-oriented program is having an exposed public method. Similarly, a script that is taking certain input or parameter from a request and then return a response as an API. So a script can be, for example, an endpoint or a URL, uniform resource locator, or simply called a link on a browser once you type it. So that will definitely run a PHP script or an ASP.NET script or any scripts on a web platform. So it will respond based upon that API request. So then there can be a device driver which is installed within an operating system, and then different applications can call those device driver, for example, for audio or video purposes. So any video editor or any audio recorder can call that device driver's API in order to operate that specific device. That can be a speaker, that can be a microphone or anything. So that is to have an API once it is called by any application in a specific way by passing a parameter, and then that device driver works based upon those parameters and then returns something as an output. So that is called to have an API. What is basically Postman is a tool, a software tool available freely to download it, and you can also register on their website in order to share your work or collaborate among a small team. So that is basically a tool to test the APIs by passing various parameters as a web request or an API request, and then you will get a response. So that will basically help you as a tool before you can use that API within your application once you are developing it. So Postman will beforehand give you an opportunity to test the API of the external application. Once you pass a parameter, then you get a response. So in that way, you can utilize that API within your application. And if there is an unexpected response received within your application, you can also pass similar parameter through Postman so that you can debug why the specific response is returned. So basically, it supports also in collaboration and building a better API in efficient way. Why better API? Because it gives you an opportunity to test an API, to avoid the bugs, and to collaborate among a team. You can download simply through postman.com website, and you can also sign up for free to save and share your work. And then also it is noted here that once you install even the Postman tool and then you log in through that tool, whatever work you are saving, it is going to your web account, and next time once you are connected through internet, you will get your work already in your workspace inside Postman. So you can install a Postman on a Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation VM if you are working on a one-box developer's machine in order to test your APIs, or it can be on any other client system from where you are calling your even one box or your the production or test instance of Dynamics 365 or any other software or open source application which is exposed, and it is exposing some APIs. So after installation from Postman tool, basically you need to sign in using your free account which you already got by registering on postman.com. What are the features of Postman? There are 4 features. The major feature which I have covered here. Basically, one is API request, which is simply a web request, as earlier on told that most popularly it is now a web request. Collection is a set or a group of API requests. The first one, whatever is the API request, if you make a collection, means or you want to group multiple APIs of same topic, so you can make a collection. Then there is a workspace. Workspace can be shared among a small team, and where you can save your basically work. And environment is basically used to save frequently used values which will be commonly used while testing the APIs. So then there are certain terms which will be very useful once you start using your Postman tool. So there are various terminologies used there. So it is important to learn those terminologies. The first one is API endpoints. Once you talk about endpoint, keep in mind it is simply put a link, a web link, or it can be called a URL, Uniform Resource Locator. So it is nothing complex. It is just an end. This is just called an endpoint. So then there are API actions or verbs which are used to call an API, and that are basically through API endpoint or a URL, such as you can use get, post, put, or delete actions, or normally those are also called CRUD operations. Or CRUD means C for create, R for read, U for update, and D for delete. So it is same like get, post, put, or delete. Here the create in CRUD means to put, and read means to get, update for post, and delete for delete. So both are same, whether you call it get, post, put, or delete, or you call it CRUD as a whole. API parameters are then filter criteria that is sent as a part of API request for specific API actions. So we will see in a demonstration also, and while accessing the OData API from D365 Finance on operation. Then request parameter or query parameters are subtypes of API parameters. So request parameters are nowadays in Postman tool, it is called as path variables. So basically it replaces some part of API endpoint defined for the filter purpose. Whereas the query parameter are sent as a key value pair as a part of API request for filtering purposes. So the path parameters, it will replace the endpoint like URL. Within that URL string, it will place the path variable. So that is the only difference. In a request parameter and query parameters are sent as a key value pair. So both are for filtering purposes as a whole. API headers then are basically sent as a API request. So there is a particular header information which is part of API request sent for the server to understand or to get an additional part or information of a client, like from where the request is coming up. And then there is a main API body basically that will allow you to create or modify resources. When an API request is sent, the body defines additional properties to hand over to the server. Normally, post or put requests usually have bodies. So there can be 4 type of, like as I mentioned, get, post, put, or delete actions. So the post and put means post is for update and put for insert. Insert a record, for example. So those are having a body. Okay, then API response is basically once you send an API request, so server will send back you a response that is normally known as API response. So these are key terminologies once you start using Postman tool. Okay, so now there is another important thing, like normally it is referred as OData or REST API. So OData is an open data protocol defined or approved by ISO standard, and that is called OSIS standard. That defines a set of best practices for building and consuming RESTful APIs. So RESTful is another jargon or terminology which need to be also explained. So a REST API or normally known as RESTful API are also basically application programming interface or APIs or web APIs that basically conforms to the constraint of REST architectural style. and also allows for interaction with RESTful web services. And REST stands for basically representational state transfer, and it was created by the computer scientist Roy Fielding. And then a REST API, basically what it does, it leverages HTTP methods which are described by RFS 2616 protocol, and it uses basically following HTTP requests, and that is again a CRUD operation, or a get, put, post, delete operation. So get for request to fetch the data, put request to alter the state of data, such as an object, file or block. Okay, and then post is request to create the data, and delete is request to eliminate it. So different HTTP verbs or status code are used by REST API can be seen at above. Okay, what is OData and REST API continued in the other slide. OData helps you focus on your business logic while building RESTful APIs without having to worry about various approaches to define request and response headers, status codes, HTTP methods, URL conventions, media types, payload formats, query options. You don't have to worry about the structure, and it gives you a uniform structure. We will see in a bit. OData also provides guidance for basically tracking changes, defining functions, actions for reuseful procedures, and sending asynchronous batch requests as well. OData RESTful APIs are easy to consume. OData metadata, a machine readable description of the data model of APIs, and basically enables the creation of powerful generic client proxies and tools. As you can see in this slide that there is Dynamics instance URL is mentioned above in the first row, and by slashing it with data is basically giving you through OData, it is giving you the list of DMF entities. And DMF is a data management framework available within Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation. Why it is used? It is used for data migration and data integration, and it gives you normalized forms of various tables, denormalized form of various tables, basically because due to normalization, the common information like for supplier or for customer is split into various tables. So that becomes complex once you integrate with an external system. So it need to be denormalized to have a single record, even though at the back end there are various tables involved. So DMF basically provides you a denormalized form, meaning combining various records or rows from multiple tables into a single one for the purpose of exporting or whether importing through integration or through data migration. So there are two approaches to interact with DMF. One is asynchronous through batch API that is called, and the other one is through OData, which is a synchronous approach. Once you talk about synchronous, asynchronous is simply put asynchronous once it's run in a batch framework or in frequency or periodically, and that is for the support of high volume of data. And synchronous once it is a real-time interaction between DMF and another external system, so it is called a synchronous interaction. So the OData way of accessing DMF is called a synchronous interaction. So the first URL is explaining various entities, how it is exposed through OData. We will see in the browser. And the second one is specifically showing only the vendor's entity. And vendor entities means all the rows available through DMF, and those are denormalized rows definitely. And then there is a CRUD or OData or REST API approach to access a vendor entity, just like an SQL query where you put a select clause and you put a where clause. So in this way, for example, you can see here dollar format JSON. So it gives you a JSON format in return, and then also you put a filter on a vendor account number, and then a space, and then equals EQ and a space, and then you give a specific number of vendor, which is here 1001. So it will return the only specific vendor number. And then you also put select vendor account. Basically, you put here the fields which you are interested in, like vendor account number, vendor name, address description, formatted per primary address. How you got the names of these fields? Basically, by only the previous URL where the vendor entity is returned, and it will show you the various fields and their values without any filter. So next is demonstration. We will turn into our D365 VM. So now we have turned towards VM of Dynamics 365. This is a one box machine, which is a dev machine, and everything is pre-installed here. And I can show you here Dynamics interface where we can see all vendors. And here you can see the first vendor number is 1001 ACME office supplies. There is a certain phone number. I will just open this. So then the URL which I showed, that with this endpoint, I have just after slash I have put the word data with slash. So this will show you basically all the data entities available through OData. These are all data entities available in DMF. So you can interact with any of the data entity available in DMF, and it will list all the data entities here. So even the sequence which we are following, the video sequence in which I am developing a resort management system. So that I have developed a data entity also there, and that is called PKR_resort tables. So that data entity is also available in this whole list, which is basically an XML based list available. So you can just access it by using the URL of your D365 finance and operation instance, and by slashing it with data. And then once you find any of the entity interesting, like vendors here, so then you can basically interact with your see here vendors v2 available, and this is a vendors only entity available. So v2 is just like version. Once Microsoft is releasing a better version next time, so they will put a version for that. So next time v2 and v3, v4, like this one. So there are different changes in underlying tables or maybe in the entities. So the naming conventions will increase the version numbers. So if I want to access this entity, so I will just slash it with another one slash vendors. So whatever name of your entity is, you can just slash and put the entity name, and it will basically show you all the rows available basically in that entity. And that means these values are not only coming from entity, but behind the scene there are multiple tables involved in that entity, from where in a denormalized form the entity is showing you the data, the whole data, without any filter. So in the next tab I can show you I'm also again using this endpoint to access the vendor, but I am also putting certain filter criteria here, like a vendor account number. And how I got this name vendor account number? Basically, it is nothing but a field name, like data area ID is a field name. So same as vendor account number is a field name, and then there is a certain value here. So each time it will be repeating for each of the row. So first row is this one, then it will go to the basically second row, or yeah, this one is the second row, in this way. it will go at the bottom, and you will find various rows of having this same field name having a different value. So I have put a field name here, and then I have put an equal sign and then a string of 1001 in order to get only the record of vendor account number 1001. And then after embedding it here with ampersand sign and a dollar sign, I am basically giving it like the choice of my fields what I need to see here. So that is the select statement. If you have seen SQL statement, select statement, and what you have seen here is a where clause in select statement by using filter keyword here. Filter equals to vendor account number equals to 1001. And in the select, I am only interested in vendor account number, vendor name, address description, formatted primary address. So these are just field names which you can also find from here. Like whatever you need here, you can just put with the comma separator, and then it will show you basically only those fields which you have listed there, like vendor account number, vendor name, and then address description and formatted primary address. So it is only showing a specific data here. So same approach we'll use inside the Postman tool, and which I will just show you, and then we'll see how to basically interact with by using a Postman tool. So the next part is basically this is a Postman tool. And here you can basically log in with your own account, and once you are logged in, so you will see only your workspace which is available online, and you can basically add through signing in your every work will be stored in your workspace there. So it has a file, edit and view and help menus, and there are various sections on the left hand side. And what we can do is we will start by clicking on the environment on the left hand side, and just I will add a new environment which I can give a name for this. So this will be a D365 demo environment. Okay, and here you can see there are various kind of variables which you can add here, and as previously mentioned, these will be a variable which will be frequently used, so you can list them within the environment. So what we can use here for our demonstration of OData while accessing through Postman from a D365 interface. So basically I will use these various variables, and how the values are put here. Basically it is the same thing which you have registered as application. You can see my previous videos as well, which I have recorded for for interacting services, D365 services, JSON services or SOAP services access through an external application. So there previously in order to register that console application within the portal of Azure, you need to register them as a application. So you can go back here, and in the app registration you can see a resort management system was registered, and similarly you must have registered your own. So here I will open this application which is registered here. This is necessary in order to interact with D365. So basically Azure will assign a client ID, and Azure will give you authentication in order to authenticate and then interact with D365. So security need to be implemented. So I have opened the application, and you can see here application client ID is mentioned here, which is basically in the client ID, the same string value is basically used here. And what is tenant ID? Tenant ID here is directory tenant ID, which is put here as a variable. And then client secret is definitely a key value, which I will just show you. Grant type need to be a client credentials, because this is kind of a client credentials. And what is the resource? Resource is this URL, which is for our case will be one box dev machine. So the same URL I will be using here. And for client secret, I will just show you once you go to the API permissions. No, basically in certificates and secrets, if you go, you can basically create a new client secret here, and there will be a key which will be given to you, and you can only copy it one time and it will be hidden next time. So that will be the key, secret key, client secret, which will be used in this one. So basically I will not show, definitely it will expose this application also, and I will delete this one as well. So basically these are various variables which we need to register in the Postman in order to use them in our testing. So I will just use this tenant ID variable here. Make sure that it is same like on a single row, and the string need to be copied in the initial value. Okay, and then the client ID, which I need to be paste here. Okay, and then client secret. Okay, and then there will be a grant type, which I will paste here, and the value will be client credentials. The resource, so resource URL is also put here, and I will also put this client secret here, but I will not record it. So once you have saved your variables in the environment, these are frequently used variables, you just need to select it to make this environment active. And then next I will just go to the plus sign here on the right hand side, and you can see here you can create an API request or a web request, and there are various CRUD operation or actions are given here, which you will be using. Normally we have discussed get, post, put basically, and then delete. So these are the commonly used operations, and then there are certain more operations. So we will basically create a post operation here, and this post request we will give a URL basically in the format like HTTPS. Yeah, this one. And here you can see it is basically used here in order to get the token from Azure AD, Active Directory token, used for authentication. And this is the URL for that, login.microsoftonline.com, and then the specific tenant ID which we have used in our environmental variable, like I will show you here. This is the tenant ID which we have used. So that will be basically stored as a variable, and we are using here by using the colon and tenant underscore ID and / authentication token. And this is the URL we have put here. And then basically what we can do, we can go to the parameters and give here the for example, in this key tenant ID, we also used to put here the value here. Value will be coming from our variable. So what we can do is we can use in this manner tenant underscore ID. Okay, so in this way we have put our variables in path variable. Okay, the next part is we need to go to our so next we'll after entering the parameter of path variable tenant ID, I will just go to the body section, and in the body section we can select here the form data, and once we select it, it will be given a key value pair here, which you can also enter in the way like in a bulk edit like this one. And here each row are separated by new lines, key values are separated by a colon, and this is the main form how you can bulk edit here. If you don't want to bulk edit, you can just enter here a key and then a value. So I will just enter one key value here, like it can be a grant type, and then with the curly brackets, grant type. Okay, in this way as a key value. Or if you want to go to the bulk edit, you will see here this is the way in which the bulk edit forms work, and the remaining values I will edit here as a bulk. Just take care about spellings. There should be no typos. So there will be a client ID. Okay, for each row there will be a separate variable, and this will be client secret, which is stored as environmental variable, and then there will be a resource which was a URL to our D365. Okay, so this is the way in which the bulk edit works, and then you can just switch to the key value based interface, and you can see if everything is like this, so it means it is perfect. So then we need to just go to our test section here, and in the test we can put our basically code here, and that will be a C# code. So I will just copy paste this code here. So what it does basically, response API response is received, which is passed as a JSON variable, and then it says in the next row that if JSON is not an error, means the response is not an error, and response body is not empty, and response is not null, and access token is also not a blank, means some access token is also there. So then what it does, postman.set environmental variable, a bearer token will be set here. So this is the code which it does. And next what we can do is simply we can just send it, but before that what we can do is just save this and save this within a new collection. As I have told you before, those are a group of API requests. D365 demo. Okay, so this collection is now demo collection, and save within that demo collection. So on the left hand side you can see the collections. In the demo we have created a post API request. So that post API request is currently open. I will just test it by sending it. So we will send certain parameters, tenant ID that will be concatenated here as a path variable, which I have told you. Path variable will be basically part of the endpoint. So this is the path variable which is concatenated here, and then there are certain variable which are in the form data sent separately, and then there is a test here which I have already explained. So I will just send this request and we'll see how the response is received. So now the request has been sent successfully, and the response API response is received. and you can see token type is bearer expires in this much time. So there are various things, and there is most important thing is access token is received. So it means now it is authenticated. So the first step which we have done is basically in order to receive the authorization which we have successfully received, or Azure AD token has been received. So it means the authentication has been successfully passed. So now well, in the test code, what we have done is basically we have set the bearer token in our environmental variable. So if we go to the environment, so you can see here the bearer token is basically set in our variable as well. So this is through our code in the test in which the Postman dot set environment variable is received through the JSON and access token which we have received. So this will be used in our next step. Now we need to create a web API request to perform basically a CRUD operation on a desired data entity, which in our case will be a vendor data entity, and we will create a URL as per our requirement, and we'll see how to access the OData, and so it will be also useful if we parameterize the API request by a variable that will be stored in environment. So we'll just start with another page here, and the get request will be there in order to get our data or read the data from our URL. So the URL I will just copy from here. That is basically a resource. So that will be here, and then /data/ we will use our vendor example, which is here, which we have previously accessed through the browser. Okay, so we'll just a moment. I will just copy the vendor example here, and then here you can see vendor account number is hard-coded 1001. So instead of hard-coding it, we can use our a variable. So by placing it in maybe as an environmental variable. So I will just go to the environment, and here I will use a vendor code or vendor account number, and I will just put the same one, 1001. So instead here I will just put the curly bracket and vend account, 2 times curly brackets are over, and for the environmental variable I will place here the value on which I need to put the filter. Okay, so now I think it is quite clear. The remaining things are straightforward. Just I will remove the space here in order to remove the extra characters. Okay, so now this is our URL here, and it has shown us in at the bottom you can see as a key value pair in a parameter which we have embedded in our URL. So you can put it separately here as well, and if you want to put the field names, so those also you can put here. So now we need to add the authorization header, basically that is already received. So we have stored that in bearer token environmental variable. So the token must be prefixed with the bearer in the header. So what we can do is we can go to the headers here, and in the key we need to put here authorization key, and then value will be bearer. This must be prefixed, and then bearer token variable, that is environmental variable, which we'll use here. Okay, so now what we can do, we can go to our test, and here we can type in our code variable JSON object, and we'll parse and receive response body semicolon test. This will be get vendor info, and that will be equals to if JSON error is not, means there is no error, plus the response body is not blank and response body is not null semicolon. So here the brackets need to be square brackets. Now we need to just save by putting it in our demo collection. Just save it. Also save our environmental variable by Control S. So once you save it, then I can send the request here. You need to wait a while till the results are shown. That need to go through the authentication, and then using the OData service to read the vendor or supplier record, which we have used as a filter criteria and storing it as an environmental variable. So this is a very simple example which you can also follow for any of the entity. For example, a customer entity or a fixed asset entity or a bank entity, whatever you like, you can just test it within the Postman and use a similar approach in order to test it. So you can see here the response is received now. It took a while, and at the bottom you can see the response, how it is received, and the OData context is mentioned here. The vendor entity is being accessed, and the fields name which are in the select are also shown. And then on the basis of the filter criteria, 1001 vendor account number, so the vendor name which was selected, and then address description and formatted primary addresses are basically shown at the bottom. And in the test results, get vendor info is shown, and the headers are also shown here. There is no cookie. So this is how we can just check. Basically, first we have run here the post API request, and through post, what we have done basically before that post, I have basically defined variables which were necessary for authentication in order to get a bearer token or bearer key. So tenant ID, client secret, and grant type of client credentials and resource was used here. And then we have used post API request in order to get the bearer token. And in the post, we have basically defined here the URL login.microsoftonline.com, which is basically in order to get authentication. And then we have used here the path variable. The tenant ID is received basically from environmental variable, and then inside the path variable it has been assigned and it has been used here within the endpoint, and slash authentication 2 and slash token. And once we have defined this, where we have defined also the body, and in the body also the majority of the variable values are coming from the environmental variable. Okay, so and then in the test we have basically received and assigned the bearer token, which is now part of environmental variable available to any of API requests within this Postman tool. So then we have defined a get API request in order to read the data, and in that we have also used the URL or endpoint which we have previously shown through browser, how to access the OData or DMF through OData. So by using the vendor's entity, we have put format of JSON and the filter criteria which was hard coded earlier on, but now we have used a variable which was having a value stored in the environment. So here you can see 1001 is stored here. So the same variable is used here, and this is basically the filter criteria. And then within the select we are choosing basically the field which we are interested in. So based upon this, only one record was returned, which is shown at the bottom. So here you can see the record is shown, and vendor account number, vendor name, address description, formatted primary address. So in this way basically you can test the Postman, test the API using the Postman tool. And also there are many other features also. You can use the flow of API when you need to test multiple APIs in workflows, like series of calls, and then see the results. So in maybe in coming up some of the video, I will also use these flows and show you how to do that. So I hope this is very useful for the people consultants or integration consultants who are working on integrations, communicating with the APIs, and communicating D365 with external systems. So thank you very much, guys, and stay tuned.